So good. Now that I'm here, thanks for having me.
So, how did you get into this field?
Oh my gosh, yes, it's been a roundabout way. Thanks for asking. I guess I first started being really interested in understanding men and their mental health when I began really deeply volunteering. And I started out in organizations that focus on food scarcity. I was doing human trafficking at the Tampa International Airport. I was serving veterans. There was, various organizations that I really saw where men needed support. And as I worked my way into it, I started answering a rape crisis hotline. I, started doing a little bit different work. In Tucson, I did domestic abuse survivors, worked with them. So there were just a group of people that I felt like were missing out on information that they really could benefit from. And the commonality in a lot of these groups where men were um, struggling with regulation. I felt that there were opportunities for men to be differently regulated, and a lot of their outcomes could be majorly different for them. And so I really started that way. I often say that I have been at the hands of misbehaving men for a lot of my life. So whether it was a encounter in preschool that I had, or whether it was a coach, basketball coach, track coach, what have you, I've kind of learned to manage sexuality in a different way. And I was also raped in college. So I think I have a wide spectrum of understandings of sex. And then in the same way, I was always playing on the boys' team sports. I can outlift a lot of my gym mates in the mornings. And I definitely relate to cisgendered men a lot of the times too. So this just really fits for me. And I have learned that the hurt. And it's really important that forgiveness and understanding and compassion and forward moving thoughts and ideas are really important to me. So,
Wow, that is super impactful because
thank
there
you.
is it can be very difficult for people to understand like how when people have been touched inappropriately by people that are men, like they usually have this fear of them. How what prompted you to say, you know what, I want to lean into it. I want to lean into understanding what was this causality of it.
I love that. Well, if you haven't noticed, maybe I'm rather competitive. And I thought one day, after I kind of came out of my stupor, I thought one day that someone's inadequacy is not going to affect my ability to reach my sexuality.
Hmm.
Um, there was no way that I was going to miss out on pleasure because of people who didn't know how to handle their own. It didn't seem like that was a way to live anymore. And I definitely felt that in order to, I really wanted to gain agency over my own sexuality, and I didn't want it to be narrated by someone else.
That is awesome because I know we spoke about this before we jumped on. Last time we spoke was about how certain people will use modalities like BDSM to reclaim their sexuality, and
Yeah.
how it is actually when you're able to regain that part of yourself that has been injured or actually been removed, and how it could be a lot more. How would I say? Where you can be able to look at it from a multiple perspectives, and especially when you're conversing with your partner or with other people.
100%. And I think, BDSM, just like bodies are not inherently sexual, BDSM is not inherently dangerous. And so I think there is such mystery behind it. But, for your veteran audience and anyone that you support as a peer specialist, I think would greatly benefit from BDSM because it, as you had mentioned in our previous call, the person in submission is actually the one in control.
Hmm.
And so it's a really powerful way to gain dominance over a situation that you have agency over. And so, experiencing or kind of arranging a consensual rape situation with a partner in BDSM, that is a way for the survivor to gain agency over what has happened to them. It's giving them the opportunity to say, this is how it will go, this is how it will not go. And so I think using sex as a way to manage trauma is beautiful. And I don't know if this could lead us into sort of the idea of, and I think you may have a lot of insight into this being a veteran, but understanding sort of our nervous system and understanding our erotic nervous system.
Well, we'll say it's just beyond just being a veteran, but a lot of guys, they believe, especially the younger ages,
Uh-huh.
and if they're dealing with traumas, we believe a lot of our intimacy is very physical. And it's climaxing is more of like, hey, this is something that's happened between us, or is it transactional relationship?
Hmm.
Where when we are allowing ourselves to get more emotionally vulnerable with the right partner. Not all people are the right person, people for us. And it's when we were feeling like we're high up there, when we were feeling like the fight flight freeze comes in. So I know I use sex, especially in my younger ages, to be able to, or using the word hunt, to be able to chase women, to be able to go after them, and not in a physical sense, but in a how could I be able to get something out of it? And at the same time, it's now changing up how the past used to be, even though it looks similar, but now how does it actually become different, and how do we be able to connect to a person?
I love that. And thank you for sharing past experiences of your nervous system in your sex life. It's a perfect example, a perfect lead in. I say that we have five. It's fight, flight, freeze, spawn, and FUCK is the fifth one.
Hmm.
And I believe that our nervous system is responsible for managing high states of arousal. So, just like you had said that in your younger years, you were using it to get something. And I think that's such a curious statement. It's almost saying like you were looking to get an arousal management need met, whether it was to feel validated, to feel seen, to feel calmed. I don't know what sex brought you. Would you feel comfortable like bringing up any shares with that?
So what it did was it allowed me to be seen. And it was people will use different phrases, but based off of past experiences, like men and women both do it to be validated, to be able to be okayed, and how we will actually use that type of relationship. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yes, and how beautiful to realize that. I think it's vulnerable to kind of get curious of why we quote unquote use sex as a form of validation and to better understand it. It's not to judge it or to shame it. It's simply to say, what does this sexual encounter bring to me? And I
Hmm.
think validation is huge. I certainly use it myself now.
So, how have you used this in sex counseling for men? What were some of the areas that you allowed them to be able to have a new narrative with their own sex life?
Yeah, I definitely think that shame and grief are really big categories for men to digest and work through. I think there is a whole lot, I think underneath anger, which is where men can often feel comfortable in,
Hmm.
I think that underneath anger is grief. And I think that understanding, hearing, being relationally attuned to knowing how men feel in their grief, feel in their shame, I think is one of the greatest gifts and opportunities that I have. Certainly, and being a somatic sex counselor, we are heavy on processing shame because it sits in our bodies. So, shame is a huge body keeps the score
Hmm.
manifestation, if you will. And, I've been a hospice volunteer for 7 years. So, the power of grief has been one of the most curious emotions to me. And I find that our culture talks about grief as though it's just to be experienced when you move or when someone dies or when there's divorce. There's like three griefs that you can experience, but I think it's job loss. I think it's dating loss. I think it's a friend moves away loss. I think there are so many experiences that men have. And in my experience, through the men that I work with, I think that men were maybe taught to manage emotions rather than feel them. Do you have feedback on that you would
I
want to share?
I believe that a lot of times boys, when they get angry, that they actually get told to stop, and it's starting to get conditioned at youthful ages. And the other aspects of, like, when they start to mature, they have been emotionally stunted throughout their life, and they start to romanticize a lot about sex. So, like you're saying about the grief is sorrow, but then there's also this loss, this frustration, this helplessness, this hopelessness, and there's so many different areas. And I know we're going to talk about porn addiction a little bit later, but it's how do we actually now navigate it? Like, if we lost somebody, this is sometimes where ED will come into it, or when we are not able to be able to express emotions, it stunts us physiologically, like as far as not being able to perform.
Certainly. Your segues are so cool. I'm really enjoying this. Something that I have found, and I am very into existential sex counseling and that work, but I do believe that the penis is the conduit for male emotion, because I believe that because emotions were told to be suppressed to boys in childhood, but sexuality was encouraged and touted, that that it has to go somewhere. The emotionality has to go somewhere. And I believe that the penis holds wisdom. I believe that the penis speaks. Um, and I would love to hear from you on this, of course. And I think there is something to be said that if the penis is a conduit for male emotion, when there is experienced grief, there is often a misbehaving penis, a naughty penis. And, I like to call it that so you don't get too in your head about it. But
I think honestly, where it starts to go with people using sex, especially for control, that's where pornography comes into, or other physical assaults come into, because it's a need not being met. And I believe sometimes with, especially since guys, that like anger is the okay thing, and this
yeah.
is where the control comes into. But I don't know much about that type of wisdom. I'm curious more to hear about what made you feel that way.
Uh, so sort of like the how I got to the compassion part, or
Yes. Like, how did you said that the penis actually has wisdom?
I gotcha. Yes, yes, that part. Well, I think there is so much, there is so many misbehaving penis occurrences that are happening because of something going on in a person's life and not mechanically or in their body. I mean, sure, there are certainly a lot of health conditions that affect people's penises. However, most people who come to me, their penis is misbehaving because of a grief, because of a shame, because of an emotion experienced. And it was just too hard for me to ignore that the genitals, the largest sex organ is your mind,
Hmm.
and the second largest are your genitals, and there has to be, a pathway to that. I have to believe that. And in our nervous system, so many of our emotions are near one another. So when men were at the guillotines, they had erections, and they had those erections because they were fearful. So a lot of the times our nervous systems crisscross one another. So if a man is feeling stressed and he uses sex as the outlet, his penis may be saying, "Hey, we're stressed," but it just needs an outlet to sort of work through that stress. So to me, it just seemed like a very intuitive connection, and I've read supportive books on that. I think The Existential Importance of the Penis is one of the coolest books. It's really heady and a little wacky, but I find it short. I'm a little wacky and it's short, but I think it's a cool read.
I think honestly, these other areas are always important to explore and to talk about because this
Yes.
conversation can be off putting or even semi taboo to people. Because being a if we bring light to the darkness areas, it doesn't have to be so in dark, it doesn't have to be so shameful. And if we're able to meet people like, hey, you know what, they're using this modality, and to be able to comfort their needs or to be able to go out, like you probably have heard people say, hey, I need to go to sleep, so I'm going to go masturbate. Or if I had a really rough day, I'm going to go do this. And they're looking for a release, but they're not able to feel the emotions of where the stress is coming from or the other outlets. Because, and I guess this is just my belief system, and where we're not able to fully be able to name the emotions, we
Yeah,
go to an outlet that we can be able to perform some type of control over it or a way to subdue it or distract us.
sure. Sure. And something too to point out is I think the nuance in this work is understanding that it is a-okay to masturbate to go to sleep, as long as you also have another basket of resiliency tools to pull from that you're also choosing to use. And so I think there's so much black and white in the sex world of saying, porn is inherently bad, or masturbating is inherently bad. And there are so many helpful and unhelpful things about all these avenues. And so that's something I think that's it's really important to understand is you're feeling into your body and understanding, is the feeling I'm feeling right now really to go to sleep, or would it be more helpful for me to do some breathing and some journaling and name these stressors, understand these emotions, and get it out of the way that way. So it's really, I think, that nuanced and that radical honesty that you got to get with yourself of, am I doing this just to get through the day, or am I doing this to really just help me sleep because I've been sleeping like crap for the last 6 days? Where does that
And
land with you?
well, it lands with me just like where people use cannabis to fall asleep or use alcohol to fall asleep, or they'll use other things but to sedate their brain.
Yeah.
And the area that you alluded to of journaling or breathing, what you're doing is allowing yourself to delay the gratification of that type of hyper control and being able to explore what's actually happening within. Because this is a really big part of the message is for me what I'm trying to propose is individuals to be able to start to learn to explore emotions, to be
Mm.
able to explore their mental health, to realize that their emotions are feeding or they're guiding the way that people react and behave to things.
100%. You bring me to where I was on, I guess was it yesterday? My gosh, the days are blending. But I went to support a group here in Charleston called Turn 90, and they help prisoners when they get into the world. They help them reacclimate into society, and they have a recidivism rate of 16%, where the
Mm-hmm.
national average is 66%, meaning 66% of inmates go back to prison once they're released. And understanding their emotions, they work in CBT. They do
Mm-hmm.
CBT therapy at Turn 90, and understanding your emotions is the, key to these fellas reacclimating themselves to society. And it's so imperative. It's such a disservice. I'm so passionate about it. And you seem to be too, of understanding that pause, like the beauty in the pause of that 5 minutes. Can I journal? Can I eat something? Figuring out, am I tired? Am I hungry? What's happening in my body, listening to your body. And I think a cool example that someone had told me once is our body is constantly speaking through us and to us. And if you're walking on a path, and I lived in Tucson, so there was like animals everywhere in the path, dangerous animals everywhere. And you'd be walking in the path, and up ahead, you'd think you'd see a snake in the path, and your body would kind of get prickly or goosebumps. It would get real scared. And then you realize, oh, it's a stick. So your brain would catch up, but your body always reacts first, right? But we are so conditioned, especially men, to not feel their bodies, that they wouldn't even process that. So it's giving us men, especially, that moment, that pause to understand what is happening in my body. And like you said, naming the emotion is so cool. It's vulnerable because it's like, if you're in an argument, you can say, hey, I'm feeling really angry right now. It feels vulnerable to say, but naming the emotion kind of helps it sail away a little bit, right? And you know this through peer support groups you run. I mean, I love your feedback too on this.
Well, I agree with what you're saying. It's part of the human nature to be able to. So, by the way, I don't do any more peer support. I did it for a while, but so I'm
Superstar.
actually I'm in university for social work right now. But it's
Okay.
still what I learned is that we stay in a limbic part of our brain, especially if something has happened and we are looking for that possible threat. It's very similar to um, a person that has associated, say, a trauma from their father, and the father hit them, and it was at night. So when it becomes dark time, when it starts to get darker in the day, they start to feel more anxious because they are preparing for something. If an individual is just had a stressful day, they're going to not be observing the stick, the metaphor that you said. They're going to be looking for that snake, and they're going to be looking for the way to keep themselves safe. But like you said, as the body gets very aroused based off of the stressors, the the anxiety, and then your body's already lived through it. But now your brain is catching up. So now you have to challenge that belief system, and that's where you start processing what emotions were you feeling, what was the later response, and it's very similar to what you just said.
Yes, I love that. Love that tie in and how you've completed that with the bow. That's perfect. Yeah.
But so, how do people find you, and what is like the normal way that a person will find you to be able to receive services and help?
Yes, I'm on Instagram and YouTube. And I guess the best way to find me and all of that would be on my website, franfrye, FRANFRYE.com. And most of the fellas that come to me are experiencing some sort of problematic sexual behavior or compulsive behavior, and they are not managing it in the way that they would like. So it can be the full gamut of experiences, misbehaving penis, erectile dysfunction, or it can be compulsive behaviors where they're not leaving the house. And we, definitely have interventions all along the way to support that. I greatly follow the acceptance commitment therapy
Act, yep.
protocols and structure act. Yeah. And I just think the acceptance of emotions, like we were just talking about, is so important. I love to think of emotions as being on a conveyor belt. Our brain makes stuff up all the time.
Hmm.
So emotions, words, thoughts are all on a conveyor belt, and you have such agency and authority to grab it, pick it up, and say, "I want to think these thoughts today or not." Put it back, and think of them as a wave and riding through the wave. I think that's a wonderful tool uh, that's available online that folks can look up.
So, but not to cut it out, but like, how does these services help them? Do they get a different relationship with their sexual body? Do they get it with their partners? How do how does it really help them be able to regain control? And what have you seen them do it?
Great question. I think so. I deal with a lot of infidelity, I would say. So it is understanding the why behind the man's behavior. It's not judging, it's not shaming it. We're just understanding the why, and we're making it, we're congruent. We're getting the fella congruent, his behaviors and his beliefs matching. That is ultimately the goal. We
Hmm.
want the fella happy with what he's up to. There's also a lot of communication concerns around sex with partners. So, a lot of the men that I work with tend to want to have more sex than their partner. So, there is a lot of that going on. And I am very encouraging of my fellas getting their needs met and communicating that to their partners. So we are talking out a lot of situations. We're understanding, what their sex life is like now, what needs are not being met. I suggest timing, tone, and turf as a suggestion on when to talk about sex. Dr. Sex with Emily talks about that timing, tone, and turf. You want to be in a good mood, probably at the coffee table on Sunday morning. When you talk about your sex life, you don't want to be talking about it in the bedroom at 9:30 when you're having sex.
Hmm.
So there are, those type clients. Then there's fellas who have compulsive thoughts and they're regularly thinking about sex all the time, and they are not understanding why they're not feeling so regulated. And we're definitely working with regulation skills there. I always say that, and I have read this somewhere, a regulated man is safer than any weapon we sell in the name of protection. And I firmly believe that. So, regulation, shame management, attachment, understanding attachment wounds. There are ADHD plays a major role. I definitely have some ADHD tendencies for sure. And I relate to this work by all means. Sex is relatable. It's fun for me. I move with my body. I'm very body focused. It's just how I think and move. So, yeah, I hope I've kind of answered that.
You did, and so do you ever actually? Is there like a common theme when the guy and their partner, regardless if it's heterosexual or
Mhm.
homosexual, of like what actually creates that void and what actually creates that the lack of sexual that they are actually getting?
Yes, great question. I think communication is indeed lubrication. And I think that learning how to communicate sex, I don't know when we would have ever been taught it. We were barely taught about our bodies. So the last thing people care about is if we are communicating about sex well. That isn't on people's radars, I don't think. So I really think communication is lubrication and helping couples understand how to communicate. But for me, I want to teach agency, radical responsibility. I want to take everything that I know in my brain and tell my clients, because I believe we teach people how to treat us, and I
Hmm.
believe we teach people how to F us. So if you're going to be getting the sex that you want, I think you need to be able to get it from them and teach them how to have sex with you. So a lot of it is giving people that agency to know how. But communication, I think, with couples is something that is very much a commonality and you know men who are stepping out on their wives, a lot of the times they're looking for novelty or different experiences. And I hear, if my wife just was interested in this, I wouldn't be doing this. And I'm not sure how full that is of the story, but I do think it plays a major role. So if I can help my client communicate those needs and have him not feeling shame in his behaviors, that's a huge win. So communication definitely is missed.
What do you think stunts the ability to communicate with their partners?
Mm, Shame, I think. My when I was married, I certainly did not communicate my needs in at all in my sex life. And now I couldn't even imagine not communicating it, but I've spent so much time. So I just think that we aren't given these tools. I do think a book called Desire is really great for couples to read together. I think listening to sex podcasts together, relationship podcasts together, sharing those things is helpful in the communication. I think a lot of fantasy. I think people want to feel safe in sharing their fantasies. So safety, attunement. A lot of these things though are missing in relationships in general. I don't
Hmm.
think we're taught these things, right?
I believe that there's a lot of people where they are afraid or ambivalent of that possible rejection of opening up what they need. So they end up actually suffocating themselves instead of actually being able to explore it with the person. And it and I kind of feel like it causes that resentment based off their own internal shame because they're not getting their needs met. And needs I actually use no, and I do believe that in relationships, communicating is key. Communicating is key in the bedroom. Communication is key through life. If you're not willing to say what it is that you need, then what you're doing is you're depriving yourself and creating this void between each other.
100%. And it humbles me how little men ask for their needs to be met in the bedroom. I'm always surprised. I've had I don't think I'm speaking out of line. I had a client who, was receiving oral sex from his wife and he's never liked it. And he said, "You're telling me I got to go tell her now that she's bad at it 5 years after I've been telling her she's great at it?" And I'm like, "Yep, that's exactly what you have to do." And like you were saying, when you don't want to share something, the thing we talk about is don't yuck somebody's yum. if they're interested in it sexually, let them be interested in it. It's not for us to judge or shame or anything like that. So I think it's establishing kind of rules in a relationship and safety. I want to be able to share this.
Because if you allow yourself to say, "Hey, I don't like this. I don't like the way that this is being performed. Can we go about it differently?" And then all of a sudden, you still have that guilt of like, "Why didn't I say this sooner?" Or "Why did I let this actually go this long down this road?" Well, you have the opportunity to change it, and this is like even with mental health. It's like I'm 41 years old. I could have decided to continue to keep going down that same route, or I could choose to, I don't want to say circle back, but change course. And being able to help another person that's with you, that's supposed to be standing beside you, understand what you need, not just about what I think I need, but being able to be vulnerable. And
Yes.
this goes back to like like that whole control aspect. This the whole needs not being met. But I appreciate you being able to share this stuff because to some people this might be too much. To me, I believe that people need to hear different types of theories, different types of scenarios to be able to have an understanding within oneself.
Yes, and thank you for giving me the space. And I'm honored to be in these communities and to have my research and ideas and feedback even considered. I consider it a real privilege to be among men in community, and I find it just to be a fascinating ride. And I've learned so much about myself through this work. And I'm very grateful.
So, what does a somatic sex therapy do? What is it?
Yes, yeah, it's sort of heady. I would say it is body based coaching. So you are learning emotions, you're learning about your shame, you're learning about your desires, you're learning about your erotic templates, you're sort of experiencing sex through the body. And I believe it's really helpful to men specifically because it helps with boundaries, it helps with shame, it helps understanding how to ask for your needs to be met. My working theory is that men need to learn how to say no. I believe that a lot of men say yes when they don't want to, whether they feel like they need to have sex, whether they feel like they need to be drinking at a party, whether I don't know. I don't, work, get this done by 6 p.m. or you're fired. Let them fire you. Say no once in a while. And so feeling that in our bodies and really understanding what that no feels like, I think is such a powerful, um, it's something so powerful to witness and to learn about men is really truly teaching men their consent, because when they understand their own no, they're able to respect others. So when a no is not just compliance, there's a big difference between consent and compliance. And I think it's very much confused because men are often just complying with things in their life. How does that land with you?
This actually makes a lot of sense. And when you are able to say no, you're also able to say yes.
Yeah.
And when you just say yes to everything, you are depriving yourself of all the other opportunities and being able to look within. It's just interesting when I was listening to it because I, I'm trying to think about how to express it, but when you're teaching an individual, even in this modality, it doesn't just stop in this modality. It actually bleeds into the rest of their life where, like, hey, you know what? I don't want to go out tonight just because everybody else wants to go out. I don't want to go out tonight. Or I don't want to do this. I can say no. And it actually gives them the autonomy that they've been looking for.
100%. And it's experimenting with that. When you say no and you say, no, I don't want to go to the party or I don't want to do that, you have to say, what does this feel like in my body? You have to pendulate because then you're going to be able to understand in sex, did I like how this felt? No, I didn't. And I'm gonna say something at that Sunday morning coffee table about it, not in the moment. But yeah, I'm so glad that that reached you in that way.
It did, because it's when you're able to say no and you're not being ruled by your emotions, because if you don't actually understand your emotions, you're going to be ruled by them. And
Mm.
it's it's an issue that I believe that a lot of guys unfortunately have been stuck with, where it's like don't know how to feel that shame, don't know how to feel that guilt or that hurt, to be able to vocalize their needs. Or a big thing even in my own life was I wanted to be seen as a child. So then how did I used to be seen was when I was a young kid sleeping with people
Mhm.
or joining the Marine Corps and then actually doing that. And it's like, but at the same time, it's what was the purpose? What was the thing? And it was actually wanted to be cared about or to be thought of. And when people think of even just this type of action, it's like, this is what they think that they're being cared about. But what happens if they actually ask for what they need, even though it looks very similar, but it's different? It gives them way more autonomy over themselves.
For sure. And you reminded me when you first started talking to remember that emotions are not demands. So they're just something that, float along and we can experience them and understand them differently. And like you say, connect them back to experiences and reshape them.
So, do you work with couples or do you work with individuals?
Just individuals, preferably. I'll certainly welcome a spouse or a partner. But yeah, typically individuals.
Do you ever suggest while you're doing this work for a person to speak to a couples counselor at all, so that since they're asking for their autonomy, but then also asking with another person to be receptive?
Absolutely. And I often find that there is a team. I'm pretty niche. How do we say that? And so I am usually part of someone's healing. So they are often in couples counseling themselves, or their partner is seeking therapy outside. So there is a lot of healing work going on, and I'm a part. I get to be a part of that.
Where do you see your clients? Do you see them only in South Carolina or do you see them across the whole United States?
Yes, across the US and abroad. The reason why I have chosen sort of the path that I chose is so that I have access and can get access to more folks. That was really important to me. So the education route that I went is, I always say that I have the same sex education as a sex therapist. So I've had a year and a half of sex education, and then I chose my other year and a half. I went to school to get my master's, but I realized there were a lot of limitations in the kind of counseling that I wanted to provide. I felt that the government limited us, also just different things. And so I chose to spend a year and a half studying somatics and understanding the body. So that is really what I bring forth, is this sex education and then understanding the body. So that's sort of how I can work with people all over. So I'm not, in one state only.
Gotcha, because I know I'm working on becoming a therapist eventually as a licensed clinical social worker, and we are only able to operate within our own licensure. Because, like, when you were talking, I was looking up how it deals with the breathing, how it deals with actually being in tuned. And I think it's really fascinating that you chose that route and how it's able to be extremely beneficial, especially since it is a niche area or a niche area, however you want to actually say,
Thanks.
but it gives the ability for people to be seen and heard. So I appreciate you being able to share all this.
Thank you so much. It's truly an honor, and this has been a wild ride. And I feel really grateful I've landed here so far, and um, have heard from you and have received feedback. It's truly a pleasure.
And the last question is, so you said you got YouTube, Instagram. What about your website, and how do you get referrals?
Yes. So my clients are really good to me and often refer me. I find that it's pretty hush hush. A lot of folks will contact me privately. There's not a whole lot of shares on public forums so much, but folks definitely reach out to me on my website, which is franfry.com. And I think I just redid the website, and I think there's a ton of information there that can really support the person that is looking for help in these areas.
Well, like I said, it's a pleasure, and I really hope that this message is able to find the people that need it. And I believe it's an extremely important subject that's not talked about enough.
Thanks, Will. I really appreciate the platform for it.